Hey everyone, it's Anthony. So I just wanted to take a moment real quick before we start the episode to tell you about something that's pretty cool. Podchaser, which is basically the IMDb of podcasts, is doing their annual Reviews for Good campaign. So throughout the month of April, every review left on a podcast will donate 25 cents to the World Central Kitchen, which is providing meals to refugees fleeing Ukraine. And if the podcast responds, they will double that donation. All you have to do is go to podchaser.com, sign up for free, and leave a review on your favorite podcasts. Our Podchaser link will be in the show notes, and we'll be sure to respond to maximize that donation. So while you're there, don't forget to follow us and check out some of our other podcasting friends. And if you're so inclined, leave them a review too. And as always, if you send us a screenshot of your review along with your address, we will send you a sticker to thank you for your awesome support. So go ahead, head to podchaser.com right now, sign up, and leave us a review. It's going to help some folks that are desperately in need. And now on to your regularly scheduled disclaimer.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.
Hello and welcome to Capes on the Couch, where comics get counseling. I'm Anthony Sitko.
And I'm Dr. Issues.
This is issue number 152, and our president-level patron Ruby has requested Elsa Bloodstone, a fascinating character. I have been interested in her since I read Nextwave, which I'm thinking is where I would say a lot of people got introduced to Elsa, because she really hadn't appeared in anything aside from a 4-issue solo series prior to Nextwave. And then every version of her since then has been based off of Nextwave. So it was kind of like a reset for the character, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. Real fast, we are in the end of April, so we are in the last few days of Podchaser Reviews for Good. Just a reminder, the disclaimers at the top of the show. Go to podchaser.com. Sign up, leave us a review. We will respond, and money will go to the World Central Kitchen, which will help Ukrainian refugees. And you can leave us an awesome review like our friends over at the So Wizard podcast. Ask them anything, more like ask them why their show is so consistently amazing. Well, thank you, dudes. We definitely appreciate that. You can leave a review for the podcast as a whole, or you can leave an episode review like So Wizard did for our 150th AMA. So either way, you leave the review, 25 cents goes to the kitchen. If the podcast responds, another 25 cents gets donated. So, and I've been managing to stay on top of all of the reviews that we've gotten so far. So, like I said, that ends April 30th. So just get those reviews in before the end of the month. So we're going to jump right into the background without any further ado. So Elsa Bloodstone, created by Dan Abnett, Andy Lanning, and Michael Lopez in Bloodstone #1, debuting in December of 2001. So her origin in the first 4 issues, in this 4-issue run of Bloodstone, ultimately gets retconned. And as I said, her entire characterization is functionally very different, to the point that that first 4-issue run pretty much doesn't count for anything at this point, but I am going to mention it. She is the daughter of legendary monster hunter Ulysses Bloodstone. And according to the original run, that 4-issue miniseries, he had been dead for a couple of years, and she and her mother arrived at his estate to close things out and gather up her belongings. And she was about 18, blonde, very much, I don't want to quite say Valley Girl, but the comparisons to Buffy the Vampire Slayer are definitely, not without merit, shall we say. But Abnett and Lanning indicated that they hadn't watched Buffy and that they weren't really interested in going for a one-to-one comparison with her while they were writing the book. So that all gets retconned after the Nextwave. So from here on out, basically her background is where she is now and everything that's sort of been established after that. So Ulysses was a taskmaster who showed Elsa little affection and instead focused solely on training her to be an effective killer. This drove a wedge between them, and when Ulysses was dying, Elsa refused to put him out of his misery despite his request. So when he died, she inherited the Bloodstone, which gave her increased durability and strength. And so then she proceeded to go ahead and kill lots of monsters, vampires, werewolves, that sort of thing. She was a founding member of the Nextwave team, which battled Dirk Anger and HATE and also blew things up just for funsies. So she joined the Defenders for a spell to help them fight demons, during which she battled Deadpool and Elektra when they tried to steal the Bloodstone. She later became a teacher at the Braddock Academy, where her younger brother Cullen was enrolled. Then she joined the Dr. Doom-led Avengers during Axis, where everybody's moralities were inverted. Good guys became bad guys became good, etc. In the aftermath of Secret Wars, Elsa ends up on Battleworld. She encounters a young girl with no memory who she names Shuttup. She and Shuttup are followed by a mysterious figure who turns out to be an alternate universe version of Ulysses, who is hunting down all forms of the Bloodstone across all universes. Elsa realizes that Shuttup is a manifestation of her lost childhood, and together they kill Ulysses and merge with the stone, and then Elsa uses the power of the stone to resurrect Ulysses and give him a second chance. She then took a young Inhuman boy named Kei Kawade under her wing, as he had the power to summon and control monsters. And once he grew strong enough to basically control his powers, she bid him farewell. Then she fought a beast that infected her Bloodstone hand, and with the help of Deadpool, she was able to recover. He took the infected stone and then sacrificed himself, destroying the monsters they were fighting and curing the infection in the process. So Elsa, in turn, looked after Deadpool's head while the rest of his body regenerated. Hashtag because comics.
Hashtag because comics.
And then recently, she learned that she and Cullen had a half-sister named Lyra, who was born a very long time ago and sent into another dimension by Ulysses. And Lyra came crashing back to Earth, and she and Cullen and Lyra had to reconcile the past of what their father had done for the millennia in which he was alive, because Ulysses Bloodstone, without going into his background, he was a caveman when the Bloodstone basically fell to Earth via a meteor, and he grabbed it. And I don't remember if it grabbed it or it hit him or whatever like that. But in any case, it gave him this power and super longevity, and he was alive for thousands of years, and he became this monster hunter. So he was a character in Marvel Comics for decades. I think he was created sometime in the 60s. Anyway, that is the rundown on Elsa Bloodstone. As I said, Nextwave turned her from a blonde valley girl to this very sassy, blunt British redhead who carried rifles and guns in a guitar case and just liked to shoot things. And every version of her since then has been based on that, not the original characterization.
So it's almost as if the video game Lollipop Chainsaw got like just totally eliminated, and they said, no, we're just going to do the Hellsing anime. And I'm pretty sure I just lost about 95% of our audience. Sorry.
I am aware of the two things that you referenced, but I have not played Lollipop Chainsaw nor watched the Hellsing anime. I remember being intrigued by Lollipop Chainsaw because I was like, this is an interesting concept. It's kind of like, Buffy the Vampire Slayer again and I hate, using that kind of a thing to say, well, it's basically this, but different. But for shorthand purposes, that's functionally what it is. It's a cheerleader going around with the talking head of a zombie as sort of like a guide or something along those lines. Do I have that?
It was the decapitated head that was saved from zombiedom magically that she carried around. Yeah.
I remember there was a talking head she carried around.
Yes. That is true. And her former sensei who ended up dying, but somehow reanimated, and that head of her boyfriend ended up on the body of her sensei. Yeah, it's weird.
When did you play this?
Didn't so much play it as watch one of my favorite Twitch people play it on stream once. And I'm like, this is so absolute bonkers, and I love it.
All right, that's fair. So the issues, and Ruby gave us sort of carte blanche to come up with the ones that we really needed to talk about. So the first one, and we've had a couple characters like this. She really wasn't raised as much as she was trained. Ulysses basically said, "You are my heir, and you are going to do this when I'm gone." Kind of like a Ra's al Ghul type situation. It's very much in that vein of this long-standing millennia-old character saying, "I'm not going to live forever, so I need someone to take after me." But there's no affection. There's no real substantive childhood. It's just, you need to kill. You're not killing enough. You're not killing in the right way. Let me show you how to kill more. Let me show you how to kill properly. That may cause some trauma. So I'm led to understand.
So I feel like we can pull two different sides of this here. And you're right. We've done variations on this before. But the side you just mentioned, the trauma involved with, for example, real life would-be childhood soldiers, which is a thing, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, because it's not as common in the United States, but certainly in many other parts of the world. You are pretty much recruited to a life of service at a very young age. Although you could also say that people that get involved in youth violence and gangs is also the equivalent there. But that's not really the crux of this particular issue. It's the fact that you have, in theory, an adult presence and a parental presence that's pushing for that. And that's the part that's really dangerous, because societies don't really stand that way, at least not for long. It actually equates to lawlessness at some point. But that's fairly easy on the surface to identify. Most people can recognize, unless they are truly indoctrinated in that mode, they recognize that that's not very healthy, and it's only for true survival in the moment, and you get rid of it as soon as you can. The other part is the part that, let's be honest, gets glorified if you get what I'm about to lead with here, because we have had prominent examples of this in our lifetime. The last time a topic like this was brought up, I was very selfish because I mentioned I'm a boxing fan and I mentioned the Mayweathers. And so everybody at this point knows Floyd, Money, Mayweather, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to rehash that. Instead, I'm going to go to the ones that we know very well. And like I said, not necessarily meant as negatives as we're trying to portray with Ulysses here with Elsa, but it has major consequences. A few examples. I mean, you got Tiger Woods as, someone that was on TV from an incredibly young age because he could swing a golf club, and obviously had significant success. But then later on in other parts of his life, people started to pick that apart and say, well, in part because of that, did he lose out on all of the other parts of his development that would have allowed him to treat success in a healthier way so that he didn't have so much turmoil later? And then we have the situation with, now it's a movie, but the point stands, of the Williams sisters, Serena and Venus, in terms of their father and what he did for them to allow them to become the tennis phenoms that they became. And I'm just using those because they're popular examples. The truth is, there's plenty in all fields and all walks of life where we could think of this. And there are plenty of non-prominent everyday scenarios where children are established to have a particular goal, whether it was something that was observed as a talent and developed by the parent, or something that the parent had keyed in on well before the child ever knew that it was going to be a prominent part of their life. But for one reason or another, there is that only way to function. And on one hand, it's the ultimate in simplification, because it determines your basic survival techniques. You know what you need to do to put food on the table. You know what you need to do every waking hour. And that's great. But kind of behind the scenes thing here, it can lead to some problems, because while you have outstanding focused function for whatever it is you're trained to do, all the other executive functions that you're looking to accomplish may not get the time necessary to form in a way that once that primary function is not as good as it used to be, because I know I was talking about athletes, but let's be honest, we all change over time. We change cognitively, we change emotionally, we change our interests. Oh boy, that's a really big one. If you're earning your living doing something and you just don't like doing it anymore, oh, the dissonance that creates. And try explaining that to the person that now has loved you, quote unquote, because this is what you do and they helped you do it. So, we're really stepping on some toes here. We're crushing some toes if we're not careful. Put that all together and recognize there is no easy way out. There is no shortcut home. Sorry.
Wow. Rocky IV. Love it. Love it. Excuse me while I shift gears 7 times. I counted. I think it's 7 or 8 times in that song. Anyway, it's interesting that you bring up the disappointment from the people who love us, because I think that's something that we've all kind of dealt with in some fashion or other, because the expectations that are placed on us from a very young age are more often than not done with good intentions. Not to say that there aren't folks that try to live vicariously through their children, but I would like to think more often than not that parents just want the best for their kids. But there is this expectation of, but I thought you liked this. Why are you leaving? Why are you walking away from this? And that can definitely, speaking from experience, have an impact on people, because now you feel like your agency has been taken away from you. And now you're doing this thing that you don't enjoy just to make other people happy. And then you resent the activity, and you definitely start to resent the people. And for somebody like Elsa, this wasn't even something that at one point she enjoyed and she just decided to fall out of favor with it. This was never anything that she had a choice to begin with. And that makes it worse, in my opinion, certainly. So that segues very nicely then into the second issue, which is this notion that she's not a fan of her calling, but she's decided it will end with her. In the one comic, I think it's Marvel Assistant Size Spectacular #2, which is a very interesting title. But the story indicates that she has said that she will never have a child because this bloodstone is her family legacy, but that she does not want to put anyone else through what she has gone through, that what Ulysses put her through. And I'm certainly not going to tell her nor anyone that, you should have a child for reasons. But I'm intrigued by this notion that for her, it's a binary, that either she has a kid and it continues in her legacy with the family legacy, or she doesn't have a kid and it ends with her. She never really seems to give any potential future child the choice that she never had. And so I think that that's very much rooted in her trauma, but I will let you, speak to that a little more in depth.
I mean, that's complete suppression, but not in the way that we would normally think, because this is incorporated into her daily routine. It's a part of her life, her existence, and a lot of the emotions, both positive and negative, related to how she's decided to function. She's not going to eliminate it that way, but she can create a greater sense of control by saying, I'm not going to continue the bloodline. And maybe not as extreme, but there have been plenty of times that I've noticed, and to be honest, that I've thought of myself, where I think to what my parents did and how they raised me, and in a positive way say, okay, how can I improve on how they treated me? And I think that can be healthy because it allows for growth. But at the same time, is part of that simply reactionary because there was a associated negative emotion with what's previously been experienced, regardless of if it was beneficial to you. We know that parenting is hard. We know that no one is perfect at it, but that doesn't mean that because you didn't like something that it was the wrong way to do it. There's something very subtle about that. And until saying this out loud right now, I'm not exactly sure I've put words to it like this before. Elsa, of course, though, is really just creating the hard line, as you said, and creating this, what I think is a false dichotomy, but a dichotomy nonetheless, that says if you can't have a kid where you can change the narrative, then just don't have them at all. But that says a lot. That basically indicates that for whatever reason, what are the factors that have allowed her to draw the conclusion that whatever child she has is going to have such a strong impetus to end up in a similar situation? Is that fatalistic because of biology, because of genetics? Because I know that even in the storyline, there is indications that once Ulysses was exposed to the Bloodstone, that there is a genetic component to it. And if that's true, not much different than someone that grows up in a family with significant abuse, but also someone with a history of a predominant mental illness, perhaps, or a predominant biological or medical illness, or substance use history, things that the child growing up says, I know that I never want to do that, and yet somehow find that they're exhibiting similar behavior patterns, and recognizes, well, if that's true for me, even with my attempts at avoiding it, then how likely is it that my offspring is going to follow the same pattern? That's a very valid concern. For the most part, from what I've seen, people usually don't let that hinder them from ultimately having children. They're just very cognizant of it, and hopefully they have mature conversations with their partner about their history, their family background, and what the expectations are and what they can do to still live the best life possible. But that's another part to this. How much does Elsa want to have that type of relationship where she's willing to acquiesce to the idea that someone is going to also have a role in this? This is not a single case study. This is not something where, at least since we're not asexual beings, you're going to have, contributions from someone else. And not to say that things can quote unquote be offset, but knowing that it's a partnership, and not just a partnership, hopefully a family and a community, if done in a positive light, that there is much more room for shades of gray rather than this black and white view of what the next generation is going to be.
Okay. Now that you've kind of laid it all out like that, it makes more sense to me. It was just a situation where I was looking at it as this narrow binary, and I'm going, this just doesn't seem okay to me that she would just be so narrow-minded as to say, well, I can't have a kid because it's inevitably going to end up. And, you referenced the genetic component to the blood gem and things of that nature. So I understand there. And full disclosure, I mean, I've read several Elsa comics. I haven't read every single one, nor have I read hardly anything involving Ulysses. So I don't know exactly how valid that is, but I'll certainly take your word for it. I just think that it's and it's, again, totally her agency. And I'm not trying to tell her, no, I think you should have a kid. It was just, if you're going to make that kind of a decision, I wanted to make sure that you weren't limiting yourself just because you thought that it had to be this way. So the last issue, which is related to that, is that she tends to keep people at a distance to focus on the job. And again, this all goes back to this notion that she doesn't really love what she does, but because the nature of the danger of it all, she feels obligated to keep people at a distance. She doesn't really have a whole lot of friends. Kei Kawade was kind of an outlier there. And she did have some sort of connection with Deadpool while they were helping each other out. Cullen notwithstanding, she's not really much for people. And again, it's tending to focus on this job. And for me, it almost seems counterintuitive, like you don't like this job and you're doing it because you feel like it has to end with you. Where does the joy come from if you're not going to at least surround yourself with people who can help you on that? Maybe I'm taking a narrow-minded tactic myself.
Well, I think what you're saying is valid, but there's more to it than just whether or not you like something. There's oh boy, this is going to be a complex topic that I am really going to butcher, but I think it's worth putting out there, and I'm going to do my best, and I'm going to completely mess up the description, but it's worth it. Ikigai, Japanese meaning a reason for being. Basically, you can have a lot of different points in your life, and how they come together is the most critical thing. There are things that, and these are 4 different sections. There are things that the world needs. There are things you love to do. There are things that you're good at. And there are things that you're paid to do. The way those 4 things intersect determine what the actual purpose, what they are to you. And I didn't create this myself, but I just love this concept because, for example, if you really love something and you're good at it, then you could be considered passionate about it, but you still may not be able to get paid for it and nobody else may find much value in it. If you are paid for something and it's a need, then that's a great vocation. But if you don't love it, then you still need to find a mission in your life and you're not passionate about it. Ikigai is where all 4 of those come together. So it's clear that this Monster Hunter thing is not meeting all 4 of those for her. And you've read way more than I have, so I think you'd probably be able to determine which of those spheres she's really fitting into. And you can find the great symbol and graph of this anywhere online if you just search for it. But I just love this concept for what you're talking about here, because it's really clear that she's willing to acknowledge that it's what the world needs, and she's able to, quote unquote, make a living off it. I don't think they discuss payment. I'm not getting into that, but yeah, and she's really good at it. So at best, it's a profession, meaning it's something that will make sure there's food on the table. It makes sure that the world is a better place. And, she, pardon my language, she kicks ass at it, but she doesn't love it. So that's the part that's missing. And the thing is, especially when it comes to that last part where it's not something you love, then it's hard to create a connection with other people. And sometimes you might need to fill in the gaps in other ways. You need to find some other way to get that. Otherwise, it's going to be very fleeting. At least from that standpoint, that part of your life is just not there. And that can be really troublesome. So in her case, I think it's not a matter of just saying, well, it's going to end with me. It's more like, this has been such an incredible pressure and burden that I can't imagine doing this any other way right now. But she doesn't have the realization it's because she's missing that other component and doesn't know a way to adapt it to put it all together. So once again, for people that are much more knowledgeable about that term, I apologize for barely doing it justice. But once I became aware of it, it's something that I've looked at in my life, and I know fully well that I'm not there either. And in all honesty, most people aren't. And that's okay, because the good news is you can always look to fill in the gaps where you're piecing it together with other areas. The dream for everyone is that you're going to find one thing that fills all of it. But there's even better news. You don't have to do it that way. If you don't think your job is really going to be that thing that's quote unquote your passion, okay, then find something else that you're passionate about. If there's something that you love doing with someone else, great, then bring them in with that connection, then that'll be the love. If it's something that doesn't pay as well, then that's okay. Just don't make it the thing that you're going to do with as much of your time, because you're going to have to spend more time with, something that's going to pay the bills. Just recognize that it can be a mix of things. And it's always going to be in flux, because how you feel about all of these different things is going to be in flux. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. It's the first time I really felt comfortable bringing it up, even though it's something I've thought of for the last 2 years. And this is the first character and the first time I think there was a question raised in this way where I was able to do it. So thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. And it's very clear that you are incredibly passionate about it. To that point, I also want to say that as you're bringing this up, I'm thinking about a lot of the discussions that we're having right now around work-life balance, very similar concept, obviously, and things related to the Great Resignation, and this idea that millennials and even some younger Gen Xers in that cohort, and certainly Zoomers and millennials and younger, are infatuated with this notion of work-life balance. And if you're not happy at your job, then quit. And while I am certainly not going to tell anybody to continue to be a slave to the capitalist system, I think we've overly romanticized the notion that your job must meet all 4 of those quadrants that you're talking about with the ikigai. And I'm just doing a very cursory look at it online, and I'm realizing, yeah, nobody I know meets all 4 with what they do and meets all 4 with their life. To me, I think it's as long as you are not focusing, you're not doing 4 separate things that each meet one aspect, that there's 0 overlap between any of the 4. Right. I think that's where you have to do some reexamining. But if you're at 2 and 2 or 3 and 1, I would argue you're doing okay with yourself. We've overly romanticized the notion that everything must be in perfect alignment all of the time. And that's just frankly not realistic. I wish that it were. And we certainly have the resources in the world and in modern society to reach, dare I say, post-scarcity. It's not a question of, do we have the resources? It's a question of allocation of the resources, such that we can focus on living a life that's more fulfilled by various other things that doesn't necessarily have to fall victim to the idea of chasing the dollar or the grind. I mean, if that's what you want to do, then so be it. But I think we've overly romanticized this notion that you have to find the one dream job. You may never find a dream job, or you may find it and it's not going to pay what you want it to, or any number of things. For Elsa, I think my question was not directed so much that why does she keep doing this? I mean, we had that discussion, but it's not entirely shown where those other things factor into her life. I think that's the key thing. And maybe it's just a situation where it doesn't make for a sexy story, that it's not something that the creators are thinking about, but from a complete person perspective, it does need to be taken into consideration. So don't be Elsa and just kind of focus on this one thing. Let it go.
Oh, okay. So for the first time in a long, long time, I don't even remember the last time, you just ruined my freaking pun at the end of all this. Wow. All right. Good job.
And now your face is frozen in anger.
I'm done. That's it. Okay, good.
And now Doc is staring off into the unknown. So we're going to take a break. We're going to plug our sponsor, BetterHelp, and some of our friends. And when we get back, we will get into treatment. Stay tuned. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? BetterHelp will assess your individual needs and match you with a licensed professional therapist. You can begin communicating within 48 hours.
It isn't a crisis line. It's not self-help. It's professional counseling done securely online. BetterHelp has a network of over 15,000 counselors with a broad range of expertise. You can log in and message your counselor anytime and get timely and thoughtful responses. You can also schedule regular video or phone sessions. No waiting room required.
BetterHelp is committed to facilitating great therapeutic matches, so they make it easy and free to change counselors if you feel you don't have a good connection. It's more affordable than traditional offline counseling, and financial help is available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. Visit betterhelp.com/capes, that's better HELP, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional.
Special offer for Capes on the Couch fans. Get 10% off your first month at betterhelp.com/capes.
Hey, this is Ken M.
Padawan J.
Coach Duffy.
from the Ocho Duro Parlay Hour podcast. Every week, the ODPH is talking sports, movies, TV, comics, and more. It's always a parlay of topics on each episode. You can find the ODPH on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and wherever you find great podcasts, such as the one you're listening to right now. Don't forget to check out OchoDuroParlayHour.com, where you can find the links to all of the ODPH social media accounts, links to the bands whose music you hear each week on the show, hashtag 607 podcast info, and parlay points, our companion blog section of the show. Thanks for listening to the ODPH. Now get back to your regularly scheduled podcast.
Hey, this is Cullen Bunn, and you're listening to Capes on the Couch.
And we're back. So in-universe treatment for Elsa Bloodstone, and Doc is going to shadow her?
So I'm not that stupid. I'm not trying to put myself in that much harm's way, but we have enough simulacrum opportunities, danger room kind of stuff. The whole point is I'm not really trying to be her protege or long-term student, but I want her to get the feel for that, because much of what she's going through stems from what she had to endure under Ulysses. And there's always the sense of undoing when things like that happen. As we establish, she doesn't want children. She doesn't want that bloodline, but because it's what she knows, that's what she's going to continue to do. But if she has someone now that she, in a way, is mentoring, guiding without the pressure of saying, similar to what we do with our own children, and I know a lot of people are going to hear me on this, that one wrong statement or one wrong decision and you've ruined their lives forever. You don't have the pressure of that. So allowing me to learn in that way and make mistakes and realize that it can be okay. Mind you, let me make this clear. I am not saying I'm doing this so that she's more comfortable with having children. I'm doing this so that she has a greater understanding of what the emotional content is behind her decisions, so that whatever decision she makes, it's not going to add extra baggage, that she's going to be comfortable with whatever she's doing, that heaven forbid, she may actually get more enjoyment and be able to have the camaraderie and association and socializing that would allow for a better overall life experience. So there you go.
All right. I think that's entirely fair. So out of universe, then, you had referenced earlier child soldiers. I think that's a very apt analogy to describe someone who is trained and given this survival, kill or be killed mentality from birth. They don't know affection. They don't know joy. They don't know any of these other concepts. That cannot be an easy discussion to have. And I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that in your training or in the States.
Well, I'm not going to pretend and say that I've had a child soldier as a patient, but I have had abused children or children that have had to survive on the streets for a long period of time, or adults that were children that had to put up with a lot of stuff and saw violence and death at a young age. So from that standpoint, I do have a little bit of experience. And reminder/disclaimer, although I am a board certified psychiatrist, I am not a child psychiatrist. So please, for things like this, please consult someone that is an even more subspecialized expert in this area or developmental pediatrician. The contribution that I would make in circumstances like that is the first thing of safety, making sure that that child is no longer in that fight or flight response mode. They have to feel that way. And that's not something that you do just by removing someone from an environment, although that is a key first step. It's also establishing what would be considered safe for that child. What do they know as safe? Because now what they've experienced has told them that there are certain circumstances where they're able to sleep versus not sleep. And it might be completely inverted from what we know. Because if being indoors means that you're captured, that you're confined, then they may actually prefer being outside. That is one of the things that I've read that was fascinating to me. So having a much more open environment than you would expect and just giving a sleeping bag first before just automatically putting a child in their own room with a closed door, that is something that I wouldn't have immediately thought of as being potentially traumatic, completely opposite of what I ever learned in life. So being aware of those types of subtle but significant differences, recognizing that we still have the typical hierarchy of needs. So the idea that food, water, comfort, the idea that things can be entertaining. Children still laugh. Children still think that things that are fantastical can be an outlet for emotions that they otherwise wouldn't show. That doesn't go away just because you've been hardened by atrocities. So not forgetting that. Introducing things that they may not have been introduced to. If you have never been exposed to education in the traditional sense and you don't have those skills yet, the idea that that's something that's important has to be explained. It's not something that's taken for granted about why you're going to school or why anybody would expect you to go to school. All of those things that we take for granted. Interactions with other children, because often they may not be exposed to children as children. They may simply be exposed to people that need to be eliminated. And you don't really look at age at all. It could also be a matter of identifying that, what would we consider to be play? Just really starting from those fundamental points and having those conversations at whatever level the child can understand. That's what it comes down to. And never placing blame. That's the other thing. The child at some point, if you're doing this in a way that is truly allowing for growth, they may come to the conclusion themselves that what they were doing was not necessarily leading to a better world. I'm not here to judge that depending on what side of a conflict they're on or whatever. So if they come to that conclusion for themselves, then obviously our own personal biases are going to lead to some transference and countertransference that are going to impact the nature of where it goes from there. In other words, whether you think their situation was justified from a political standpoint or whatever, cultural, ethnicity, nationality, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the other complicating factor in all of this. And doing it at a pace with the expectation that as long as you're noticing improvements in what the child's comfort zone is in the environments that they're going to be in now, hopefully they're not returning to the exact same situation, in which case I'm not exactly sure what you're accomplishing other than, potentially setting them up for a sense of false expectations. But if we truly are talking about an improved environment and improved social structure, then this is an opportunity. And I apologize, I'm not insulting adults here when I say this, but you had an opportunity to, save a tree as a sapling rather than, dealing with a fully aged oak and you're trying to somehow move the roots.
Yep. I have really nothing further to add to that other than to just say this is why we collectively as a society really need to re-examine how we speak to and treat children, regardless of their backgrounds, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of whatever it is that they've been through. We need to treat them as individuals. And it's unfortunately very common among even parents that I speak to who, again, have the best intentions, but view their children as extensions of themselves or as people to obey or as people to follow orders. They view their children as children until it inconveniences them. And then the narrative shifts. So we just, as I say, collectively as a society and as a species need to let kids be kids and understand that they're going to develop at their own speed, at their own pace, and that as long as they are not harming themselves or directly harming another child or another person, let them be, let it go. So with all that being said, and with the help of our friend Rebecca, co-host of Into the Night, we are going to get Elsa Bloodstone on Dr. Issues' couch.
Hello, Elsa. I'm Dr. Issues.
Hello, Doctor.
So what can I help you with?
Not much. You don't seem like the kind of bloke that can handle a weapon.
No? Why would you even go there?
Figured this was some sort of setup. Nobody wants to talk to someone like me out of the blue unless they've had some big problems in their life.
It's usually the other way around. My job is to help people through their own big problems. I'm not trying to foist my issues onto theirs.
Could have fooled me with the name.
I honestly hope that no one would look at it like that, but we're off topic. What can a mental health and wellness professional, such as myself, help you with?
Perhaps you could get in the heads of some of these horrible creatures and distract them so my job gets easier.
You really think that you don't need help with anything?
You sound like a hammer looking for a nail.
I've had plenty of defensive patients before, but you're trying to sound smug? Cool? I'm not sure what, but I'm not going to ignore it.
You do that. I'll just sit back and polish my gum while you keep fishing. That's not a metaphor or anything.
So subtle or not so subtle intimidation. You're a pro at this.
Now you're really trying hard to get me to talk about something. I'm not going to waste your time. I got the big stuff out of my life and I don't sweat the small stuff anymore. I'm fine.
I'll have to do this the old-fashioned primary doctor way then. Any medical problems?
No, I healed them.
What'd you heal?
Not much, just my whole arm. Had to get it back.
You grew back your arm?
No, don't be bonkers. It was magic, basically. Damn, if you don't know anything about that stuff, that sounds crazy.
Your pendant just gave a glow. What's up with that?
It does that sometimes. What of it?
You just described a massive event in your life. You talked about magic and you had a glowing rock on your neck. You won't talk about anything when I ask if there's a problem, but you tried to get me to sound like I'd be some sort of sidekick. With all due respect, something ain't right.
You sound like you're trying to make me out to be a trickster. I'm as straight as shot as they come. Don't try and use any psychological ploys on me, or I'll paint the bloody wall with your skull.
I'm a straight shooter too. You're being vague on purpose. The only real clue is your reactions and these fragments of what you give. Do you realize how hard that makes it to formulate an assessment and plan?
Fragments. You have fragments. You don't know what it's like to have your own memories as fragments. I'm not being coy when I stop you. I just figured out stuff for myself. And I don't want to have to go over it again with some random stranger that thinks I'm some bird trying to get sympathy.
Look, I am not that judgmental. Wow, you said some loaded statements just now. Maybe we can unpack...
What did I just tell you? Keep going with that and I'll show how this baby unloads.
Am I a monster to you then?
No, of course not.
But I'm representing some sort of threat to you and you're walling yourself off because you can't attack it head on like you usually would. What is it?
All I'm saying is, I dealt with him already. It's done.
I see. Well, I don't really, but whatever it is, I'm glad you moved on. So what's next in your life?
I never know that. It's whatever gets thrown at me. Comes with the territory, better or worse.
So take charge. You obviously have weapons, guile, and bravado. I mean, that's enough to carry you through, right?
In it? Wait. I know what the words mean, but you're stringing them together like it's a plan or something. Hell if I know any of that.
Is that why you want me involved? To help figure out your future plans? Maybe not as spontaneous, but it's also not as traumatic, right?
That might make sense if you didn't sound so much like a doctor.
Comes with the territory.
If that weren't truly witty, I honestly would have blasted you for that comment. I'm not into analyzing, all right?
You don't have to be. I could let you know when something's out of sorts from what I hear and what I observe. Does that make sense?
You just described analyzing.
You remind me of the stereotype of a surgeon. Usually right, sometimes wrong, but never in doubt. Chance to cut, chance to cure, interventions that make a difference. Man, I'm begging you, though. Please consider the other techniques that may be beneficial. I'm not trying to sound mushy or woo-woo, but if you ignore your emotions now, they just come out later in unexpected ways. I don't have to know your history to know that from my own, but you know what? Be my guest. Be my guest. Blast away at evil all you want, hoping to blast away your pain. Or do you want someone to point out opportunities for a better quality of life?
It's just that, well, with what I do, there's not a lot of time for processing or thinking about all that stuff. There's a job, so I do it. I'm trying to do it better than my father. And since I'm talking to you, that's already an improvement. My goal is to make it so no one else has to endure what I have. If that means keeping my head down until it's done, so be it. I can handle it.
I'm sure you can. I only want you to find as much joy and peace in that process as much as you endure the pain and suffering. That's blasphemous to those who've only learned that the obstacle is the way.
Well, if you can't crack a smile while pulling bullets in the head of mindless brain eaters, then you're deader inside than they are. I mean, I wouldn't keep doing this if it wasn't at least somewhat entertaining. It's not all bad, I suppose. But I guess I can try to find more of the joy in things while I'm at it.
Careful, or I might smile back at you and let you know that I enjoy what I do and find things outside of my job to grant me strength and love so it doesn't consume all of my waking hours, no matter the demand.
Well, that hits close to home.
Well, I'm glad something finally did. How about this? Instead of doing all the retrospective stuff, you get the chance to regale me with your latest adventure, and I just comment on what's happened to fill in the possible emotional gaps. Think of a spotter for a sniper.
I'm more of a shotgun person myself, but I get the point. Okay, Doc, you got yourself a deal. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got word of some pretty nasty buggers not too far from here, so I'm off to go separate their heads from their bodies. Fancy a look?
No thanks. I'll just wait here and do literally anything else.
Fair enough. You're lost then.
I didn't plan it, but especially near the end, that whole Ikigai thing really tied in.
It did.
I didn't realize it was going to, but that's really cool.
Yeah, it's funny how these things kind of work out. So thank you, Rebecca, for your assistance with that. And you can catch her and our friend Ray as they cover all things Moon Knight over at the Into the Night podcast. And that's Into the Night, KNIGHT. So they are available pretty much wherever you can find podcasts. They've been doing a fantastic job of covering both the ongoing Moon Knight comic run by Jed MacKay, as well as the Disney Plus series, which will be wrapping up very, very shortly. And you can also, speaking of Moon Knight, catch me as assisting on the coverage for the TV show over on the Legends of S.H.I.E.L.D. podcast, co-hosted by Stargate Pioneer and Chris from Play Comics, as well as Michelle. That is a fun opportunity for me to geek out about all things Lunar Legionnaire. So recommended reading for Elsa, I would say Nextwave for fun. But if you want real Elsa stories, I would suggest either Marvel Zombies or Monsters Unleashed. Monsters Unleashed is where she teams up with Kei Kawade. And those are some cool stories. And then Marvel Zombies gives you a little more into her backstory and some of the things that went on with Ulysses and filling in those older tales and doing the retcon. So again, last opportunity to remind you of the Podchaser Reviews for Good. Podchaser.com. Do a search for us, and we'll also have links in the show notes so you can be sure to leave us a rating and review, and we will respond. to double the donation to the World Central Kitchen. And again, if you send us a screen cap of your review with your address and you email it to us at capesonthecouch@gmail.com, we will send you a sticker as a way to say thank you. Upcoming episodes are Holding Out for a Hero, a thematic episode, Wanda Maximoff to tie in with the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness sequel, and Beast Boy, because Ariel is continuing her run on the Teen Titans. So as always, you can find all of our episodes on our website at capesonthecouch.com. We are on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Capes on the Couch. You can subscribe to us at patreon.com/capesonthecouch and unlock additional content, early access, and a whole host of other additional materials. And we're going to be getting back into the trade paperback reviews. I have a couple that I want to do before we break for the hiatus that will be going on because my wife is getting more and more pregnant by the day. So all that being said, Doc, since I took your one pun away from you, I see you're very excited. You came up with a backup.
Well, at this point, we all know that you can't get blood from a stone. That just means you have to look somewhere else.
Oh, that's even better than the Let It Go Frozen stuff. So for Doc Issues, I'm Anthony Sitko. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.
Capes on the Couch podcast is for entertainment purposes only. Dr. Issues is a psychiatrist, but he is not your psychiatrist and does not have knowledge of your individual situation. For any personal mental health concerns, please consult your own healthcare providers. For medical emergencies, please call 911 or the designated number in your area immediately. Remember that you are not alone and help is out there.